And I'm happy to announce Matthias Simperl for the third part of this session. And we, as I said already, jumped already into one of the main texts you dealt with. So Matthias Simperl is actually at the moment in Augsburg, and he studied Catholic theology and history and philosophy, but also classical philology. And he wrote and finished his dissertation in 23 on, I quote in German, das Schreiben der Synode von Antiochia, überlieferungsgeschichtliche Einordnung, Edition, Übersetzung und Kommentar. And this is a very nice dissertation thesis, and I'm really looking forward now to your presentation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and Uta Heil, and thank you to Samuel Fernandez for inviting me here and for having the opportunity to speak here and to present some thoughts I have developed in my thesis, which will hopefully be published this year. I will try to share my presentation. I think it works. Yeah, you should see now all my slides. Very good, so I can start. Dear colleagues, sometimes the discovery of new historical sources has effects similar to those of an earthquake. It disrupts well-established perceptions of history and makes it necessary to rebuild our interpretations and narratives. Unlike an earthquake, however, the cause of these effects is disputable. Are the new sources and their seemingly stunning consequences adequately interpreted? How certain is their supposed context, and even are they really authentic documents or cunning forgeries? Such questions arose in 1905 when the classicist Eduard Schwarz, whom you should see now, discovered a Syriac letter in a manuscript at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, a codex already famous at that time for its transmission of the Clementine Octateuch, le Syriac 62, the Syriac 62, which you can see here on the right side of the slide. According to its title and content, the letter had been written by an Antiochian synod to a bishop named Alexander and dealt mainly with the Arian crisis and its consequences over the eastern part of the Roman Empire, particularly the city of Antioch itself. It was dated by Schwarz to the last months before the Council of Nicaea in late spring 325 AD. Its significance for both theology and history has arisen mainly from 3 points. Firstly, the letter reports the temporary excommunication of 3 bishops who were in no way unknown. Theodotus of Laodicea. We've seen that papyrus letter or these instructions concerning him before in Madalena's talk. Narcissus of Neronias, and last but not least, Eusebius of Caesarea. According to the letter's author, they would have been convicted of their theological closeness to Arius and his adherents. Secondly, the letter includes a creed promulgated by the Synod, and if the letter is authentic, it represents the first synodal creed we have. It is not merely a reiteration of the creed of Alexander of Alexandria, sent in his famous letter to Alexander of Byzantium, as research from Eduard Schwarz to Louise Abramovsky had stated, but, in my view, a well-thought anti-Arian and more implicitly anti-originist statement of faith, as Holger Strulfov already has shown. Finally, at the head of the list of the letter senders, we encounter Osius, to be identified with the famous Bishop of Cordova, and Eustathius, certainly the staunch anti-Arian Bishop of Beroa, and later of Antioch itself. The letter, therefore, raises questions about the relationship between the Synod and imperial religious policy, as well as about the contours and cooperation of the alliance formed by Alexander of Alexandria against his presbyter Arius. Similar points have led many, starting with the famous church historian Adolf von Harnack, to question the authenticity of the letter. The proposed dating of the supposed forgery ranges from the middle of the 4th century, due to the absence of the homoousios, to the 7th century. Regardless, the letter is not attested in manuscripts until the 8th century, when it was copied for West Syria canonical collection, attributed to Jacob of Edessa. It is likely that the Syriac scholar translated the text from Greek towards the end of the 7th century himself. So what makes the letter so controversial? Firstly, it is the excommunication of Eusebius of Caesarea, which is not mentioned in the polemical writings of the 4th century, nor by the church historians of the 5th. Moreover, the Synod, to which the letter is attributed, is not mentioned elsewhere. Secondly, a point emphasized, especially in recent debates, the Synod's Creed possibly anticipates theological developments of the following decades, including a quite clear differentiation between Genau and Ginomai regarding the doctrine of God, and the rejection of the notion of the Son being willfully begotten by the Father. Finally, besides important questions about the literary coherence of the letter, it does not align with the conventional image of Osius as the court bishop and, well, spokesman of Constantine. While Constantine sought a settlement of the dispute in his letter to Alexander and Arius, a synod with the participation of Osius obviously exacerbated the situation. It poured oil on the fire. It's condemned Eusebius of Caesarea, while Constantine worked towards establishing Eusebius orthodoxy in Nicaea later on. To reassess the question of authenticity in my dissertation, supervised by Gregor Wust in Augsburg, I first edited the text using a much broader manuscript basis than that available to Schwarz and others. On that ground, I defend the authenticity of the letter by emphasizing 3 key points in particular. First, the results of the Synod were rendered obsolete by the Council of Nicaea, leading to the Synod's results' swift obscurity. This applies both to the Creed and the Anathemata, where at least traces of reception can be found in Nicaea, and in particular to the condemnations. Thanks to Constantine's intervention, Eusebius of Caesarea had been rehabilitated in Nicaea, rendering the excommunication pronounced in Antioch invalid. The reaction of Eustathius of Antioch, as recorded by Theodoratus, aligns with this perspective, as he, Eustathius, did not view Nicaea as a success in terms of church politics. See these quotations. The Ariomaniacs, fearing lest they should be ejected from the church by so numerous a council of bishops, sprang forward to anathematize and condemn the doctrines condemned, and so on. And then he states, having retained possession of their episcopal seats through the most shameful deception, although they ought rather to have been degraded. So Nicaea, in fact, did undo Antioch. My second point is the procedure of the Synod and the theological shape of its creed can be well and better than before explained if one assumes Eustathius of Antioch as the spiritus rector or mastermind of the Synod. This applies particularly to the distinguishment between Genau and Ginomai, distinction also apparent in the extant fragments of Eustathius. Furthermore, Eustathius not only engages in a theological discourse with Arius, but also with, and in my view, even more with Asterius within the Creed. Additionally, passages in the synodal letter written in the first person singular can be directly attributed to Eustathius. This aspect has largely gone unrecognized until now, as Osius of Cordova was generally presumed to be the author of the synodal letter and the synod's president. And I will try to make the point that it was in fact Eustathius, even if he is only the second one on the sender's list on the head of the letter. Third point, the letter is a literary unit and fits in well with the church history of its time. Something I'm sure we will discuss afterwards, but I first try to make my point. The letter undoubtedly contains pre-Nicene elements, such as the list of bishops as at its beginning. In addition, the list of provinces in paragraph 3, and I think you all have received the source paper Samuel kindly sent to us all, reflects changes in the Antiochian bishop's sphere of influence in the first quarter of the 4th century due to the reforms by Diocletian. It is literally, the letter is coherent if one considers the perspective of Eustathius and that of the synod to be combined here. You have passages with I say this and that, I did this and that, and you have we passages. And while they are different perspectives on the same thing, and that quite unusual way of writing a synodal letter is to be explained as an attempt, a successful attempt of Eustathius to secure his position in Antioch. The letter also explains why the synod was moved from Ankara to Nicaea. It can explain why Eusebius of Caesarea had to present a creed in Nicaea, why Constantine, after the lecture of that creed of Eusebius, did not allow discussion, but Eusebius tells us before anybody else spoke, the emperor itself said something. So Constantine was very eager to confirm the orthodoxy of Eusebius and to preempt a discussion. And possibly it may explain the estrangement between Constantine and Osius. Unlike Constantine, Osius was interested, in fact, in a theological clarification of the matter and therefore interrogated Narcissus of Neronius, most likely at the Antiochian Synod, as to whether he, like Eusebius of Caesarea, claimed to ousiai. This is shown by a letter fragment of Narcissus reported by Marcellus of Ankara, that's Urkunde 19 or document 21. If we assume the authenticity of the letter on this ground, a whole series of exciting follow-up questions arise. I would like to address one of them with you today, namely how the letter fits into the relative and absolute chronology of the months before the Council of Nicaea. I am interested in the period between September 324, Constantine's victory over Licinius, and the meeting of the Nicene Synod in May and June 325, for which Hans-Georg Oppitz for the Urkunden zur Geschichte des Arianischen Streites and Hans-Christoph Brennecke and Uta Heil for the Dokumente zur Geschichte des Arianischen Streites have established the following relative chronology. First, Constantine's letter to Alexander and Arius, and there you always have noted the numbering after Brennecke, Heil, and after Oppitz. Secondly, then the letter of the Synod of Antioch, then the fragmentary letter of Narcissus of Neronius about his interrogation by Osius, as I have already stated, and this is usually referred to the Synod of Antioch itself, this interrogation. And finally, Constantine's letter on transferring a synod planned for Ankara to Nicaea because the climate would be better and it would be easier for travel, and maybe the most important point, Constantine would have the opportunity to take part in the synod's assemblies itself. This sequence, which you can see here, was also adopted by those who assigned further documents to this period, such as Xavier Morales in 2019. In the following, so he added 2 documents which are by Opitz as well as by Brentke Heil are attributed to a much more earlier period of the Arian controversy, the encyclical letter Henosomatus on, who has as a sender Alexander, but there are many good points to make about Athanasius, the deacon Athanasius, as its real author. But we won't focus on that today. We can discuss it further afterwards if you want, but we'll focus on another point. I would like to invite you to reconsider the traditional view that we have first Constantine writing a letter to Alexandria, and then afterwards the Synod at Antioch. I want to reconsider it, and I want to make strong that we have to invert, in fact, that order of documents. My first point is dating the Synod of Antioch and its letter. And I will argue that it is most likely to be dated to the autumn or winter of 324-25. So maybe around Christmas, even if there was no Christmas feast already in the East and in the West neither. In any case, the Synod of Antioch was convened after Constantine had defeated Licinius. This is proven by the presence of Osius, which is inconceivable before September 324. At the same time, it presupposes that the second named sender, Eustathius, had already moved from Beroea to Antioch. In paragraph 3 of the letter, he and not Osius reports on the situation he had found when he took possession of the Antiochian bishopric. And well, I want to apologize to anybody who knows Syriac. There are some dots who are not in the right place here. That was because when I tried to copy the text from my edition in LaTeX to PowerPoint, it didn't work quite well. And so if you're interested in the authentic Syriac text, please do not hesitate to contact me and I can send it to you. Here it is only for reasons of illustration. I will quote the translation. When I came to the city of Antioch and saw the church exceedingly troubled by tares through the teaching and faction of certain persons, it seemed to me to be desirable that this evil should not be eradicated and cast out by myself alone. And as it was noted by some in the 1910s and then by Strudwolf again, it is not very convincing that this should have been said by Osius, who had no legitimacy to come to a foreign city and there to practice his own jurisdiction. So it is Eustathius speaking here. And the situation described fits well with the presumed results of 2 episcopates who were very opposed to each other in terms of church politics. I follow here the reconstruction which was proposed by Richard Burgess. Philogonius of Antioch had died in December 323, a staunch anti-Arian and an ally of Alexander of Alexandria. He was succeeded, possibly in a disorderly process due to the ban on synods under Licinius, by Paulinus of Tyrus, who had campaigned in favor of Arius with Eusebius of Caesarea. Paulinus also established a theological school that attracted the later Neo-Arian atheists, as well as possibly Asterius of Cappadocia. However, this pontificate only lasted 6 months, which prompted Eustathius, bishop of Beroea, to take over the bishop's sees in his turn. Due to the circumstances of the time, this change may not have been entirely regular too, as a subsequent sanctioning by the Council of Nicaea might show. This picture, composed of circumstantial evidence, suggests that Eustathius' transfer took place before Constantine's victory. In view of the above quotation, this suggests that the synod was more likely to have taken place in the autumn or winter of 324-325 and not so much later. The synodical reference to Licinius' ban on synods in the paragraphs 4 and 5 also speaks in favor of a dating close to the end of Licinius' reign, when then the grace of God brought us together to the See of Antioch, and on examining and fully going into the matters which were of common concern and profitable and needful for the Church of God, we found much disorder rampant. And then the description goes on. And finally, the cause is stated because the assembling of any synod of bishops had been forbidden in the places of those parts. On the other hand, the synodal letter supposes that a great and priestly synod had already been planned in Ankara. According to the last section of the letter, the excommunicated were to be given the opportunity to repent there, but this to know that by reason of the synod's great philanthropy, we have given these a place for repentance and knowing of the truth at the great and heretic synod at Ankara. The aforementioned letter from Constantine, in which he announces the relocation of the planned synod to Nicaea, confirms plans for this synod. However, due to Licinius' ban on synods again, the Synod of Ankara, in my opinion planned by the Anti-Arian Alliance, is unlikely to have been well organized or have been convoked before October 324. This all argues in favor of dating the Synod of Antioch between November 324 and more or less February 325. My second point, dating Constantine's letter to Alexander and Arius. I will state that it is not very likely that Constantine's letter dates before the spring of 325. Constantine's letter to Alexander and Arius is dated by Opitz, Brennick, and Heil, as well as by Morales and many others, shortly after his victory, namely in October 324. However, such a dating seems disputable to me, mainly because a concluding remark in conjunction with the numismatic and papyrological findings suggests a later dating. In Urkunde 17, section 15, the emperor accuses Alexander Arius of having jeopardized an imperial journey planned from Nicaea to the Diocese of Oriens with the controversy they had started, to such an extent that a plan that had already begun to be realized had to be interrupted. To let you appreciate, Constantine writes, how much this distressed me when I recently set foot in the city of Nicaea, my intention was to press on eastward straight away. I was already intent on visiting you, and a large part of me was already with you, when the news of this business put a stop to my plans. So that I might not to be obliged to see with my eyes what I had not thought it possible I would even hear reported verbally. But the concord among you opened to me now the road to the east, which you have shut by the controversies between you, and make it quite quickly possible for me to look with pleasure both on you and on all the other congregations, and in pleasing terms to express to the Supreme my debt of thanks for the general concord and liberation of all. Since Constantine decided to refound the city of Byzantium at the beginning of November 324, the begun journey can be dated to the end of November at the earliest. Between November 324 and the 25th of February 325, when the emperor was in Nicaea, Constantine's whereabouts are unknown. The same applies to the period from the end of February 325 to the 23rd of May in the same year, for which Constantine's presence in Nicaea is already attested. The journey that had begun and was interrupted must therefore be placed either in the winter months of 324, 325, or in spring 325. The arduousness of winter travel speaks in favor of the latter. Moreover, according to Papyrus Oxyrhynchus 1626, an imminent imperial visit was still expected in Egypt on the 26th of May. Where, however, there's also evidence for a much earlier journey by Constantine. However, there's also evidence for a much earlier journey by Constantine. Papyrus Oxyrhynchus at 10-1261 already mentions an upcoming visit on the 13th of January of that year, whereby, in view of the previously cited papyrus, an expected imperial visit can be assumed. Strikingly, the Epimeletes addressed his declaration not, I quote Fritz Mithoff, as was otherwise customary to the strategist, but to a centurion from the Catholicos Officium. Mithoff concludes from this that there was a certain urgency that prompted the Catholicos to send his officials to the Cora himself. The numismatic evidence also speaks in favor of a journey in winter. A coin minted in Antioch on the occasion of an imperial visit, it is RIC 7 Antiochia 48, is for stylistic reasons, and because Constantine still wears the laurel wreath, initially dated between winter 324 and July 325. The fact that the anachronistic legend Concordia Augustorum, that would be not very well nice to Licinius, is documented in the same coin series, moves the dating of the Antioch solidus further to the winter of 324-25. So they still used the old legend, but after Licinius' defeat. Thus, the evidence for the dating of an imperial journey to Antioch and Egypt is at first glance inconsistent. It can be reconciled, however, if one assumes that Constantine traveled from Nicaea to Antioch in the winter of 325, interrupted his journey there. Well, he was there because of the mints, because if we assume the theory of traveling mint, the gold was brought with the emperor to a city he visited. He interrupted his journey here, while in Egypt, the Catholicos is still in a hurry because he thinks the emperor will come. And he does it, he interrupts it for the reasons mentioned in his letter to Alexander and Arius, and returns to Nicaea in the second half of February at the latest. There he writes the letter to Alexander and Arius, still hoping to be able to continue his journey. This implicates that the journey was, quite unusually, originally planned for winter, which can be explained, however, by the upcoming Viginalia, before which, according to the supposed original plan, the journey to the newly gained territories in the east should have been completed. As noted in document 17, paragraph 15, Constantine stuck to his plans even after the temporary cancellation of the journey. Therefore, the preparations were continued, as Papyrus Oxyrhynchus 14, 1626, the one of the end of May, shows, while Constantine awaited the outcome of his mediation initiative. Only its failure made Constantine decide to cancel the journey and to move the venue of the Blended Synod from Ankara to Nicaea and to attend it in person. Instead of his original plans, Constantine celebrated his Viginalia after the Nicene Synod, together with the Synod Fathers, as we know by Eusebius, Nicomedia, and traveled west from there to repeat the celebration in Rome in July 326. Remarkably, Constantine was already in Nicaea, while his visit to Egypt was still awaited. Constantine's decision, recorded in Urkunde 20, to move the venue of the Synod from Ankara to Nicaea and to participate in the Synod was therefore made very late. At the same time, the mediation initiative and its failure will have taken a certain amount of time. Urkunde 17 is therefore most likely to be dated between February and the beginning of April 325. And this leads me to my third point. If the Synod of Antioch precedes Constantine's mediation initiative, some difficulties concerning Constantine's letter can be solved more easily. The dating proposed here makes it quite probable that Constantine's letter to Alexander Darius follows the Antiochian Synod. That in turn forbids Osius to be held for the career of the letter. He could not have condemned Eusebius first and then, take a letter to other people claiming for reconciliation. But it solves some of the interpretative problems raised by the imperial letter itself. As Stuart Hall has pointed out, Constantine's letter takes the Syro-Palestinian region rather than Egypt in his view, when speaking about the power of the light and the law of holy religion that by the beneficence of the Supreme were reared, one might say, in Oriental nurseries. That is not Egypt, that is Syria and Palestina. In a number of places, the emperor also seems to refer to a number of bishops, and not just the Alexandrinian bishop and his presbyter. For Hall, Urkunde 17 is therefore not addressed to Alexander and Arius, but to the Antiochian Synod. Hall must, however, relativize the address of the letter, which is clearly said to have been sent to Alexander and Arius and not to a synod. Furthermore, there are no references to Constantine and his letter in the synodical letter of Antioch. Paul Parvis, building up on the points made by Hall, suggested, on the other hand, that Constantine's letter was a reaction to a schismatic situation in Antioch, with an Arian bishop on the one side. He thinks of Paulinus of Tyrus, and an anti-Arian bishop, Eustathius of Antioch. However, it remains questionable to me how the resumption of inner church communion between Alexander and Arius would have automatically solved the internal Antiochian schism. If one agrees, however, with Hall and Parvis that Constantine, when writing, had in mind, indeed, disputes between bishops and the effects of the Arian dispute on the Syro-Palestinian area, it can be interpreted as a strong reaction to the excommunication of 3 bishops by the Antiochian Synod. While his appeal for mutual reconciliation, Constantine called for the reintegration of the excommunicated bishops, but may also have called on those excommunicated to show moderation. Eusebius of Caesarea, at least, was able to remain in office in the months between the Antiochian and Nicene synods, probably thanks to the support of his local church. In this situation, Constantine called for the mutual reinstatement of church communion. The Antiochian excommunications also explain why Constantine interrupted his journey and addressed this in Urkunde 1715. The disputed legitimacy of individual bishops, in particular the metropolitan of the provincial capital, Caesarea Maritima, would have required Constantine to take a position on the decisions of the Antiochian Synod during a visit to their episcopal see, which the emperor obviously wanted to avoid. Although Urkunde 17 was addressed to Alexander and Arius, it was intended from the outset for wider distribution especially in the Syro-Palestinian region, to which Eusebius may also have owed his copy he quoted afterwards in his Life of Constantine. What I have presented here today is meant as a proposal that is open to further discussion. However, I hope that I have at least shown to you that the sequence of letters between September 324 and June 325 is by no means unambiguous, and that different scenarios for historical interpretation arise depending on how the documents are arranged. In what is presented here, it is Eustathius who gets things rolling with the Synod of Antioch, namely first Emperor Constantine's mediation initiative, and when this fails, the emperor's successful endeavor to move the Planet Synod from Ankara, the episcopal city of the anti-Arian Marcellus, and, as I suppose, a synod planned by the anti-Arian alliance itself, to Nicaea, where he could take part in person. Doing it this way, he wanted to prevent a reiteration of the Synod of Antioch and its excommunications, and did it with comparative success. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much for this provocative presentation. And yeah, now we see each other again. So I think there are many questions, and the hands should rise up immediately. For me, it would be helpful if you, in a few words, could summarize the chronology of events and just in a short summary, the results. So do you accept the Alexander, the later dating of document 22 in this chronology, or how does it fit?
Well, that's a question on its own. So my proposal here is that we have first, I think you can see my slides again, to change the order of document 19 and document 20, and then document 20 and 21 are connected, but that is not important here. And if we follow Morales, I'm not sure about it. I'm not certain. If we, I can try here to make it visible. That should go like that. So I think we should put that here, and these two are connected. So these both. I found Xavier Morales' reasons for the later dating of document 22 and the following document 9 quite convincing. And I wondered while writing my dissertation if the author of the letter of the Synod of Antioch knew, in fact, document 22. It is quite a clear thing with the other letter of Alexander I mentioned, to Alexander of Byzantium, because the Creed of Antioch is, well, elaborated with on a copy of Alexander's Creed. There are many theological differences, but it is clear there is some kind of literary dependency. But if we compare the encyclical letters, so document 22 and document 20, the Antiochian letter, there are not so many similarities. The biggest similarity is at the beginning. Alexander, or Athanasius as a ghostwriter, writes, while the Catholic Church is one body, and document 20 begins with the same words, but then they develop two very different theological concepts. So in my view, the letter of Antioch argues against Arius, focusing on questions of the Son being begotten, how to understand his generation. It is not willful. It is he is truly generated. There is And I think that is right to state that a clear differentiation between genau and genomai, as we have it with Eustathius too. And you have no mention of generation of begetting in Alexander's encyclical letter. There you have a treatise on the term ousia, which you will not found in its turn in the letter of the Synod of Antioch. So we have two different theological concepts how to defeat Arius, and it's on that ground, it is, in my opinion, not possible to establish an order. And there's one point which leads me to think that Alexander's encyclical letter dates later than the letter of the Synod of Antioch, and it is the dealing with the doctrine of Asterius of two logoi, or two wisdoms of God. In my opinion, the author of the letter of the Synod of Antioch is aware of the problem, and while he takes a stance against it, but he does not deal so elaborately with it like the author of Document 22's Athanasius. And that is a point that leads me to think that Alexander's encyclical letter would be later, so to be put here. But then we have clearly one peculiarity. I'm not sure if it is a problem. And then Eusebius would write in defense of Arius after his condemnation at Antioch. And while that is a thing that might seem not very convincing to many of us, so I'm too not sure about it. Maybe the solution lies in the point that we have that letter only in fragment. I think cited by this third Synod of Constantinople, the second Synod of Nicaea, sorry. And so we do not know the context of the quotation we have. And so it might have been that Eusebius, who in my view never accepted his condemnation at Antioch, felt himself allowed to write still in Arius and consequently in his own defense. But that's an idea, and I'm open for any point or remark about it.
Okay, thank you. The floor is open. There are some questions. Please, Elias Cabini, please just turn on your micro.
Yeah, thank you. So my question is, on which textual basis do you found this attribution of the first singular person to Eustathius, then to, in preference, then Osius? Because, I mean, he's the first in the order of the bishops, okay? So it's easier to think about him. Is the first one. And again, he probably came there more easily than Eustathius, which was already there. So I mean, you did a great job, but we need a textual basis to fix this. Your opinion, okay? To fix this attribution, which could be. I mean, it's thin.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you for that question. So, well, I did quite thesis-like. I'm aware of that. I think there are 2 or 3 reasons for it. The first reason, in my opinion, is if we look in Conciliar Acts, that's another genre, but there the first name on the list of the participants, or the first who does his subscription, is not always, as we know, also the president of the synod. And I think we can agree that the person who speaks in the letter was the president of the Synod of Antioch. So I think the placing of Osius as the first sender and then as the second sender, Eustathius, is a point to make him president, but it's not necessary. And if we take in mind that Osius was maybe quite old or older than others, and he was a confessor, it might have been also a sign of reverence towards him to place him on the first point. The second point for me is all the things the person who speaks does are canonically quite normal if it is the local bishop of Antioch. He comes there, he sees there's a lot of faction, a lot of strife in his church, and Eustathius would have had the problem that he had two factions, two parties, an anti-Arian one who sided with the late Philogonius, and an Arian one who sided with the late Paulinus. And in my opinion, he was not able to try to resolve the situation himself, coming from Aleppo, from Beroea to Antioch, and so he was he had to bring other bishops to the city to secure his position, and it's put in a lot of rhetorics, and I think that is my second point, a canonical one. And I think my third point is the resemblances of the creed with the theology of Eustathius. So I think at least for the creed to be Eustathius to be its main author, and well, that forms the idea. But I'm quite I think it is not. These are not necessarily deductions, but I think it is more probable to have Eustathius here because he acts like the local bishop, and Osius would have done many things beyond canon law.
Holger, please.
Yes, I wanted to ask the same question, but I want to go further on it. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. I think normally, if you say if this letter was read by someone and the Osius was called the first one, then we normally would assume that it was Osius who wrote this letter. I think the other question is if it even was Osius, because who was in charge in Antioch? As we see in another synod, later synod in Antioch, where then it's Eusebius of Caesarea who would have been in charge. So I think this would be one of my arguments for that. It's not an authentic document. So I think the question is really. I cannot really imagine that it was really Eustathius who said, "I came here." Who elected him? There must be a synod that elected him. So you would think first he came there, he was elected, and then he found that there was some problems, and he convened a synod. So I have some problems with this construction. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that people were informed that Eustathius was the president of the synod, could have been told by the letter carrier. So we cannot think the letter isolated by its historical context. It was not written for further generations, but for a specific situation, and so brought to others by a carrier with oral information. And I think there people were informed, and people did know who was the bishop. So I think it was maybe more evident for them than for us that Eustathius was the letter's writer, and Osius only placed on the top because of his prestige and maybe to strengthen Eustathius' position, who could have changed from Beroea to Antioch without a synod due to the synodal ban. The second question, I agree with you. If there would have been no bishop at Antioch in that time, it would be the task of Eusebius of Caesarea, not of Osius, to convene a synod. So I think it only works with Eustathius. It doesn't work with Osius. And if it doesn't work with Eustathius, one can, that might be then a hint for the inauthenticity of the letter. But I think it really depends on the Eustathian question, if one may say so.
Thank you very much.
Are there further questions? Well, I have a question about, of course, of the letter of Constantine. I have to read it thoroughly again, so it's not very easy to come to terms with this in the spontaneous away. But I always thought it is a little bit difficult to interpret these passages in the letter where Constantine describes he wanted to travel there, but he was hindered, and to interpret this really what he is writing about and what he really means. And I don't think that Constantine actually was hindered to travel there just because Arius and Alexander had a dispute. So just to make historical sense, well, you have the chronology and you have the papyri and the coins and so on, and but actually I not see really a pressing argument with this letter, which is so directly addressed to Alexander and Arius, that it must be put in this chronology so late. So in a way, it's written to them while both were in Antioch. So this is your historical situation, or
No. So I'm sorry. So I did say it misunderstandably. In my opinion, well, when I thought about the letter, I started from the same point. Why we have evidence that Constantine not only invented the argument, I would have liked to visit you, but you do not allow me, but that he really planned a visit. We have these both papyri and we have the coin, which hints us that he came at least to Antioch when we accept the theory of the traveling wind, so that the gold for the coins was brought with the emperor, not at the place to visit before. So there was a journey planned and a journey interrupted, and that fits quite well with the letter. But what I did not understand, if there would only have been the theological debate, well, Eusebius tells us it was quite a emotional debate and there was lots of strife in the cities, but would it have really prevented Constantine of pursuing his journey and going to Egypt? Well, he had in mind to celebrate his Virginalia. It would have been a very hesitative, fearful decision. And I think it is better explained if he had real problems regarding bishops on that journey. So bishops whose legitimacy was not accepted by all people, were condemned by the Synod, but as I conjecture, supported still by the local church. And if Constantine had come to Caesarea Maritima, he had have to decide: will I meet Eusebius and accept him as the bishop of the town, or will I not greet him? And I think he, because of the Synod, he avoided his journey until a solution of that question. And my last point is, I think at least Alexander was in Alexandria then. Arius may have been everywhere. But he wrote there because he knew that is the starting point of the controversy. And if we solve that, we will solve the problems in Antioch. But it was a letter addressed indirectly to the bishops of the Antiochian region, who had already left the Synod. And that explains why Constantine talks so much about the East and the origins of Christendom. So while writing to Alexandria, he has in his mind always the dispute at Antioch. And I think that allows to bring these inconsistencies stated by Hall and Parvis together and to combine it with the historical situation. But it's a proposal, and we will discuss about it.
Yeah, quite sophisticated. Samuel, please.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the presentation. I fully agree with you in the fact that Constantine wanted to counterbalance the outcomes of Antioch. But I reconstruct the trajectory of the events in a different way. That is, I still stick to the conventional chronology of Osius, that is Alexandria, Osius going to Alexandria first and so on. And then my reconstruction would be that Osius went to Alexandria to try to fix the issue, and he was not able to fix the problem, but they condemned Arius, which was not the goal, was to reach reconciliation, and he that is a synod condemned Arius. Then he went to Antioch, and well, we know the synod there. The synod condemned Eusebius of Caesarea. Possibly Eusebius was the one who was behind Arius. That is, in the letter, for example, in the letter of Arius to Eusebius of Nicomedia, he presents himself not as a theologian who is persecuted by the bishop, but a representative of a larger theological tradition led by Eusebius of Caesarea. And then Osius, with this idea, he came to Antioch, and he condemned Eusebius of Caesarea, but Eusebius of Caesarea appealed to a larger synod. In this, Osius had experience in this appealing process with the Donatist crisis, and Eusebius knew very well the Donatist crisis and all this kind of appealing process. And when Osius went back to Nicomedia, Constantine understood that Osius was not a man with very nice political skills, and he condemned Arius, he condemned Eusebius of Caesarea, and so on. And then he decided to move the Synod of Ancyra to Nicomedia, to a more favorable context to Eusebius of Caesarea, and also to be able to control and to be present in the Synod. That is, this is more or less my view on this.
Thank you very much. I think it is. We have a lot of small mosaic stones, and the most part of the image lost, and there it is legitimate to propose a different reconstructions of that image. We at least know that Osius was in Alexandria. We know it from Athanasius, that he was present at a synod who reconciled the adherents of Coluthus. So Osius was there, and everything tends to the fact that it was before Nicaea, even if that is not explicitly stated by Athanasius. And we know from, and Madalena kindly showed us the passage, we know from Sozomenos that Osius came also to the east, so probably to Antioch, but not because of the Arian dispute, but because of the dispute surrounding the date of Easter. So we have we have a stay in Alexandria and we have a stay in Antioch. And I think the sources we have do not allow us to, they give no dates with it. But what I find interesting that in the 5th century, Osius' stay in Antioch is remembered as a stay concerning the date of Easter. And I imagine it like that after the victory over Licinius, Osius had, in fact, the task to do some inquiries for Constantine about ecclesiastical matters. And that the matter which had Constantine in long mind is Easter. So he says, please go to Antioch. And then he had heard already of those things in Alexandria, but I find it more natural before sending a letter and exposing himself, that the emperor would have first a high-ranked man, a bishop, to go there and to have some, inquiries. And I think in winter, it is possible that Osius went first to Alexandria and then traveled to Antioch with having the Easter date in mind. But I think there's nothing that forbids us that he heard of a synod at Antioch and said, that's a good opportunity to go there and to talk with the bishops about the date of Easter. Then he comes there. So, it is speculation, but it is trying to get these little mosaic stones in order. And then there he is informed not by Alexander, but by Eustathius. And there he is convinced there he begins to interrogate Narcissus, and then when he goes to Alexandria already, he's already informed about Arius, and then we have at least some hints that Coluthus was a staunch anti-Arian too, maybe with some own theological problems if we follow Epiphanius of Salamis, but maybe it was even Osius who convinced Alexander to reintegrate Coluthus into the church. This we do not know, but I think both models fit somehow, and while it is about, well, yeah, discussing probabilities.
So Shujung, you raised your hand, I think.
I think the question's largely been answered through the very sophisticated chronology and the elaboration. So thank you so very much for that. I do appreciate it. I'm still not sure I'm convinced with switching the documents around, but it at least gives me a good start into reinvestigating the question.
Thank you.
Are there some further questions? So we have the problems of letters and chronology. Glenn Thompson.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a question, Matthias. Where will we be able to get this in print?
Well, I'm preparing the proofs right now, and it shall be published in Text und Untersuchungen zur Geschichte der altchristlichen Literatur in this year. But if somebody is in urgent need, please just feel free to contact me, and yeah, I'll send you a copy or something like that. You know.
I'm awaiting his book very well.
Thank you.